Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to my podcast. This is episode 2. Today we'll be talking about Minions and Monsters and introducing a new segment before that about movie news of the last week. This is originally the plan for the podcast, is that I'd do an opening episode on Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, now just Supergirl, and then move on to each week probably having a segment on movie news where we can talk about different news in the film industry from the last week, and then focus on maybe one film or one kind of game or something later on in the episode. So today we'll be going over the movie news, and then I'll be going into a segment on the new movie Minions and Monsters from Illumination. So for the movie news segment this week, a couple news stories. One is maybe just a follow-up to last week's podcast on Supergirl. 1 week later, what does it look like? So currently Deadline's reporting that it's fourth in the box office this week after Minions and Monsters, Toy Story 5, and Young Washington, the new movie from Angel Studios. So definitely not having a great box office run. As we talked about last week, maybe not the best placement for the movie between two major animated franchises as well. So it opened with only 37.1 domestically. I think it was closer to 60-something worldwide for the opening weekend. So not fantastic for a movie that cost $186 million to make. It's actually a lower domestic opening than Joker Folie à Deux. Definitely a weak opening for a superhero movie, which is unfortunate, and it's expected to drop 73% in this second weekend, according to Forbes. So critics' score also dropped down to 55% as well. So unfortunate for Supergirl and just not having the opening it would have hoped for. I still think it's a fun movie. I still hope people will go and see it, but definitely not what DC and Warner Brothers would be hoping for there. Last week we talked about Owen Gleiberman's take on the movie, especially with respect to the scriptwriter Anna Nogueira, and it appears that my ideas of that review are not alone. Several other sources have spoken out against the article, some even calling it sexist, and that's the way film critique just works, right? People have opinions, they share them, and I think Variety's stepped out and said they stand behind their critic. I think that's the right call there, as it is film critique. People are going to have different ideas, different takes on a movie. Even if I disagree with them, I think it's great to have some of those different views on a movie. So another news source came out recently saying that it was from the Hollywood Reporter, saying that Gunn and Gillespie were actually not aligned creatively on Supergirl. I think this makes a lot of sense. Apparently the studio made their own version of a cut, and that was different from Gillespie's, and so they looked at it, they compared the audience scores. I believe the studio cut scored 2 points higher in early screenings, and so they ended up going with that for the final cut. Apparently, Gillespie's had better song choices, pacing, and even the villain, but it wasn't a lot of extra time, and so the differences were not very pronounced. But nonetheless, it makes sense. They went through 3 different composers, a lot of reshoots, a lot of early screenings to trying to figure out what the best version of this movie could be. Some reports even indicate that the middle song that's played at the end, the cover, was chosen right before the movie came out. And so a lot of changing and editing up to the very final minute doesn't usually turn out well for a movie if it's having to go through all that. And so some of the box office performance and critic scores kind of line up with what's happening. Now, that's not unusual for Warner Brothers. That's not unusual for big studios to go through that process, and sometimes it can turn into something great, but definitely Supergirl's struggling a little bit with that this time. So we'll see. We still have Clayface coming up in the future, and more news stories coming out about, Man of Tomorrow and the Brave and the Bold movie coming out. So DC's still chugging ahead, and we'll see what they make next. And like I said last week, I think Supergirl's probably going to do pretty well on streaming. I think people are going to enjoy it once it comes to their homes and out of the theaters. In other news, They Follow, the sequel to It Follows, is in progress, and Micah Monroe is back. So is the cinematographer Mike Golakis and editor Julio Perez. But importantly, this week, David Robert Mitchell confirmed that Disaster Piece will be back to score the movie, which is great news. He is like an indie video game composer that was chosen for the original soundtrack of It Follows, and really had those heavy synths, that atmospheric vibe that worked really well for that movie. That was actually one of the highlights of that movie for me, was that score, especially the piece Detroit in the original one when they're cruising around and it's playing in the background. It's just adds to the aesthetic and the vibe of that movie in such a great way. So it's great to hear that he will be back. It makes sense, keeping in line with the original. And so, yes, that was reported this week. Very excited about that news. In other news, Obsession box office tops $370 million, according to Forbes, and the film just hit streaming, or at least virtual on demand, so people can rent it at home now. And that is a really strong box office for something that just was created for $750,000 to make $370 million is amazing. And I think it signals a change in direction that people, especially younger audiences, the people, Gen Z's is the main group going out and seeing movies nowadays, and they want more original stories, something different. Obsession is showing that Backrooms performed very well as well. We're definitely in a good era for horror and horror-related movies. Less so in the superhero world. Like we said, the Supergirl is not making as much money as it would want. And that goes for Minions and Monsters, which we'll talk about later, also not projected to make as much money as they were hoping in the first week, though it's less of a disaster for them due to their low budget for the film in the first place. So yeah, I think it really shows that, especially amongst Gen Z, younger audiences, they want something new. They're maybe getting a little tired of these older franchises. And while, like I said last week, I think DC is going to be around for a long time, Minions and Gru and the Despicable Me franchise will also probably be around for a long time. It does signal a change in the film industry, and we'll see. Is Obsession just a one-time event? It may be, but hopefully we'll see more original scripts, more risks being taken with younger creators and new talent, and see that pay off when it does, and less reliance on standing franchises and different characters that we've seen a lot of already. So that's really cool. Couple news stories came out this week about Ocean's 11, the prequel. That's in the works, and Bradley Cooper's writing and directing the film. He's also acting in the film, and it's going to be about Danny Ocean's parents, Danny Ocean from the first movie, pulling off a heist at the Monaco Grand Prix in the 60s, I believe. So it's a really cool premise. We'll see how it turns out. These Ocean's 11 movies are really fun. They usually get a lot of, big A-list actors. That's kind of the point of them. It's the ensemble cast for, these heist movies. It's similar to how like the Knives Out movies work too. Lots of mystery movies do this as well, where you just need a bunch of different characters, and getting a bunch of familiar faces is fun and helps sell the movie. Margot Robbie and Wagner Moura are already part of the film. Margot Robbie's going to be probably part of the group, and Wagner Moura looks like he's going to be the villain. Josh Gad is also joining the film, and Monica Barbaro. Those were announced this week. Really liked Monica Barbaro in A Complete Unknown. That was a really fun movie, and she did a great job in that. So I'm excited about this. We'll see. Obviously, lots of remakes, prequels, and stuff coming out these days. But with this kind of premise, like heist movies, almost never go out of style. It's fun to see a bunch of your favorite actors and actresses on the screen pulling off a heist. And the cast is shaping up. It looks exciting, and we'll see how it goes. Also, with the premise, the Monaco Grand Prix is a great place to do that with the success of Drive to Survive and the F1 movie. There's a lot of interest this decade in racing, especially in Formula One racing, and nothing is like richer or more extravagant than the Monaco Grand Prix, part of the Triple Crown as well. So it's a great setting. I really hope they pull it off and really make just a fun blockbuster movie for that. Moving into more news, kind of blockbusters coming out. Heat 2 is in works. Supposedly it is going to be starting filming in November, and they have announced that Leonardo DiCaprio and Christian Bale are attached to star. So makes a lot of sense. The first Heat movie, just saw that actually for myself the first time this year, and I loved it. It's amazing, and they really found the two main actors, Al Pacino and Robert De Niro, at basically the height of their career, and putting them in the same movie. It was a big deal back then. And while we don't maybe have that level of like fame and actors in this era, in this day and age, it is interesting to see that they are going with very familiar faces, probably some of the biggest names we have currently. So Leonardo DiCaprio is going to be playing Val Kilmer's character, and Bale is going to be playing Al Pacino's character, Vincent Hanna from the first movie as well. So it'll be interesting. It's interesting that they're also going with a movie set around the same time, it sounds like, as the first Heat. Not really changing much there, but obviously they're going to have to change actors since it's been over 30 years, and a lot of the actors in the original have aged and look very different now than they did 30 years ago. So finding new characters to play those same parts, and some good actors here too. I'm excited to see what happens. I really like Leonardo DiCaprio and a lot of what he acts in, so we will see. It's supposed to be an adaptation of the novel Heat 2, which was written by Michael Mann. I've heard good things about it. I believe it has like a 4.25 on Goodreads, which take that for what you will. Goodreads ratings at least. But it seems like an interesting idea. Really like the first one. Once again, another remake or sequel. That's kind of the era we're in right now, and especially these sequels that come out 30 years after, 20 years after the original. We just had Devil Wears Prada 2 earlier this year, and some of them are great. I think movies like Twisters and movies like Top Gun Maverick did great or even exceeded the original ideas. Those were really fun. And some of them, Devil Wears Prada 2 was less exciting for me. I know a lot of people who do love that movie too, so it's not necessarily everyone's take on that. And Gladiator 2 similarly wasn't my favorite. And I think about it in terms of, if I were to show someone for the first time Top Gun, I would be like, well, you need to see Top Gun Maverick 2 as well. It's great. And Gladiator, I feel like I can show them the first. Devil Wears Prada, I can show them the first. That's all you need to see. That's all the required viewing, right? And we'll see. Heat is definitely required viewing. Heat 2, will it be that? I don't know, but it'll be interesting to see as it starts filming, and start getting more news about that whenever it does eventually release, and we'll see. Some trailers released this week as well. One of them is Werewolf or Werewolf. I'm not sure how they're going to pronounce it with the film. Knowing Eggers, he likes to go very historically accurate, although most of his movies contain elements of the supernatural or fairy tale. And we'll see. He's definitely one of the great style directors of this time, alongside like Wes Anderson, and really has a very unique, very distinct visual style that people go and expect something great from. Now, substance-wise, the movies have been maybe more hit or miss for me. I know a lot of people who are diehard fans, but similar with Wes Anderson for me as well, actually. A lot of times the focus is so much on the style. I will go see every movie that Wes Anderson makes. I will go see every movie, or Robert Eggers makes. They're just really fun, really exciting. And I just love visual creativity, especially. But if that can be paired with a great script, with a great story, that really will elevate it to the next level. And so excited to see what that looks like. The trailer looks interesting. A lot of the visual tone elements that we've seen in his other movies, he's started sticking with his cast members as well. I mean, he's worked with Anya Taylor-Joy a lot in the past. Now he's been working a lot with Lily Rose Depp and Aaron Taylor Johnson. Both were in Nosferatu a couple years back, and now they're going to be in this one as well. So looks intriguing. I'm excited to see as that gets closer to the release date and eventually seeing the movie itself. I'm very excited to see how that will shape up and turn out. So that's really cool. In other news, we definitely have Backrooms and Obsession, like I talked about earlier, breakout hits of this era. And sure enough, studios always learn a lesson, and maybe not the best lesson always, but it seems like a lot of movies and a lot of studios are going to be targeting these Reddit stories or YouTube lore, even just pictures that people generate with like that artists make and post online. These viral internet sensations, a lot of them have a built-in fan following already, and so something like Backrooms was destined to succeed because it was so focused on something that everyone already liked, that had seen it, and something intriguing enough that people who hadn't seen it before could go and really enjoy it as well. And of course, studios took the success of Backrooms, took the success of Obsession, and is now like, okay, what are some other YouTube creators that we can hunt down and have them direct a movie that will hopefully perform just as well. And I know a lot of people were wondering what's going to be the replacement for the superhero era in the 2010s, and it looked like it might be video game movies for a while. We then had a couple of movies that just didn't do as well, right? Borderlands, things like that. Video games movies have been very hit or miss for sure. Some more exciting ones like the original Super Mario movie, and some that made a lot of money like Minecraft, but creatively were a little disappointing. Not the best movie for sure. So there's a couple new movies coming out that are definitely influenced and from Backrooms and the success that had. So there's a new movie called Siren Head. The Hollywood Reporter is reporting that it's going to be made with Zach Kreger and Brian Duffield, who made the Whalefall script. They're going to be writing the script. And Duffield is probably going to direct this one. So this is also based on an internet sensation. I did not know much about this, but there was a 5-studio bidding war, multi-million-dollar deal. It looks like Warner Brothers won out in the end, so that's pretty interesting. But we will see. It's about a creature. It was created by a Canadian artist named Trevor Henderson. It has 2 sirens for a head. Naturally, the internet took this and ran with it, turning it into internet lore, making little YouTube videos, fan theories, and so definitely a Gen Z fixation that could potentially mine some of that success of something like Backrooms. And while usually I'd be hesitant, hey, okay, Backrooms was cool, Obsession was cool, we don't need to copy and paste everything and try to just, they're always trying to make money wherever they can. It does seem like an intriguing idea, especially with Zach Kreger. Most everything he's made so far has been amazing. So very excited for his Resident Evil later this year. We'll see. It will be an interesting thing. And it does seem like this is the direction that Hollywood is going right now, is we're going to find these already popular fan theories, internet lore, creepypasta stories, and turn them into movies. So that one's one of them. Another one just got reported by Deadline that there's a YouTube horror feature called The Mandela Catalog. This one had an 11-studio bidding war, and it was an original series with over 100 million views on YouTube. Its creator was Alex Kister, and similar to the Backrooms with Kane Parson, he'll be directing the movie as well. and he's going to do a screenplay with Tyler Clifton as well, and that's where the story will be adapted for movie format. And so, yeah, Steven Spielberg, Scott Stuber from United Artists, they're the ones making this movie, and we'll see how that turns out as well. Definitely a shift in Hollywood right now, as they're reading the success of these YouTube creators turning Hollywood directors, and they're chasing more of these stories. And so in this week alone, two more stories were covered where this is happening. And not only that, but A24 also released yesterday. Today's July 4th. Happy Independence Day to those who celebrate. And yesterday, Friday, they released a version called Backrooms Everything Must Go with 16 minutes of extra footage, probably bringing even more revenue, more repeat watches, people going out. It's already A24's highest grossing movie. So we will see where that goes. But definitely a shift, definitely a new direction for Hollywood as they seek out these newer or maybe stories that have been around a while on the internet, but new to audiences like me who are seeing things for the first time as they come out in theaters. So really interesting. I liked Backrooms. I'll be curious where these stories go. It seems like they have some creative people attached, but the question is, will they succeed, or was it just a one-time fluke? You never know. In other news, there's a lot of stories this week on AI in film. There is a new movie that just got released, Young Washington from Angel Studios. It's the third in the box office after the two animated giants, Minions and Monsters, and Toy Story 5. 93% audience score too, which tends to be how these faith-based movies go. They have a kind of built-in audience already, and so those people go see it, they like it, they rate it high. So high audience score for that. But this week, the director did state that they used AI to make it safer and more affordable. A Variety was reporting that. And so there's apparently a scene with the icy river, could be dangerous for actors, difficult to make in their argument, I'll say. And so they use generative AI to fill out some of those wide shots to make the icy rivers more believable. And they had the actors just standing in a normal warm pool in Ireland, I believe. So, interesting take. There's a lot of people against AI in film, against AI in the creative arts in general, and there's a lot of people coming out in support of it as well. The director, John Irwin, says, and this is a quote, "My view on the use of these tools is do everything you can for real, everything you possibly can, and then use these tools to amplify your vision and give you a bigger canvas." He also said, quote, "What I've learned is these tools are best used not when they replace fundamental aspects of filmmaking, but when they amplify and when they augment them." So 100 shots were augmented with AI in this new movie about George Washington as when he was younger. And they did use a lot of traditional methods as well. Apparently, they used traditional crowd duplication technology with an actual bunch of extras, things like that. And they're just trying to make it safer and more affordable in their argument. Also, this week, Martin Scorsese met with a secret sit-down with the Art Directors Guild, who has been kind of feuding with him over him joining AI firm Black Forest Labs. They used a promo video where he showed how AI could be used to storyboard a scene. And obviously the Art Directors Guild, they support like 3,000 below the line artists and really are saying, what about the storyboarding artists? What about those people that you could hire to be part of your film and could use actual human-made work? They've quoted saying that he's turning his back on the human artist, end quote. And yeah, it's an interesting question. There's definitely going to be more of this in Hollywood as we progress. Generative AI has taken over the world. It's such a huge new thing. But yeah, in general, I'm very against the use of generative AI. I think it really takes away from the creativity. And the moment I hear something's generative AI, it kind of turns me off of it, right? Though there's a lot of songs on Spotify now. You'll be listening and, oh, that's kind of catchy. That's really interesting. And then you see the picture and you kind of hear the lyrics and they're kind of generic and bland. And while it's catchy, it's like, wait, this wasn't made by anyone. This was made by AI. It immediately makes me not want to listen to it and value it a lot less as well. So absolutely, I'm in agreement with a lot of these people here saying that AI should not be used in film. However, there does, and this is where there are the people who are pro AI are arguing stuff. You do reach a line where you start to wonder what is the proper, like, what is the line? It's blurry. And I think it comes from a lot of people's misunderstanding of what AI is and what it's not. So there's always been tools in Final Cut Pro, Photoshop, things like that, right? Well, Photoshop has had a tool for a long time now, even prior to generative AI, where you could like highlight a certain character or something that you didn't want in it and replace the background. And it uses some sort of algorithm to determine, well, the pixels around this kind of look like this. This is probably what they would look like were this person not here. And the line of like what's machine learning, what's generative AI, it gets tricky because obviously even back then, maybe a long time ago, but for a while now, visual artists on working on movies have not had to go in and perfectly, color in each individual pixel. A lot of the tools they use do this at some level. And so there's a question of like, when does something become AI? When does it become generative fully? And that'll be an interesting thing to see. I think whether we like it or not, it's going to appear more. People always like cheaper. People always like faster. And it does look cheaper and faster. You see this a lot with advertising now. I've seen so many advertisements now that are using AI-generated videos, YouTube Shorts and Instagram. You see AI-generated cat videos. Why do we need an AI-generated cat video? I have no idea, right? It makes it less fun. The joy of cat videos is that it's a live cat doing cat things, and it's funny. So really unfortunate that is the way a lot of the world is going. But I hope when it comes to Hollywood, especially they have big budgets, they can support a lot of artists. People like human-made art a lot more. It feels a lot more real. And I think that discretion of when does something become AI or not is going to be a big question coming up in the future here as like, okay, what about replacing a background? What about all these tools that have been in programs so far? It's a blurry line for sure, but I think the key here is going to be making sure that you're not replacing, you're not fully generating, that there's still human intent and design and handiwork in every single scene. I don't think that AI shots, AI CG should be a thing. We have CG artists for a reason, and they do a great job when given the budget and time. But if it helps, if it is used in different aspects of the filmmaking to make those visual artists' job a little easier without impacting the integrity of their own work, that is a question, right? There's a lot going on here, and so we'll see what goes on. Obviously pretty interesting. Scorsese's for it. I think Soderbergh's done stuff with it as well. We're going to see John Irwin here as well. But generally, I'm against it. I would love more creative handiwork, more people being allowed to use their skills. And that's what I want to see in a movie. I don't want to see something generated by AI. I want to see some 3D model that someone actually physically, made in their Blender or Maya or whatever tool they're using. So definitely interesting, but knowing Hollywood, they're going to go for cheaper. They're going to go for faster, and that is a shortcut that unfortunately is probably going to be utilized more and more. And as it gets better, it's going to be harder and harder to tell whether a piece of work has the creative integrity that it would have had prior to AI. So definitely a big news story in the news this week as AI gets more and more used in films, and especially literally used and unashamedly used in this Young Washington film as well. So definitely a question we'll be seeing a lot more of in the future. So that's the end of the news segment. I just picked a couple stories that seemed interesting to me. There's a lot more going on in Hollywood, but I don't want to drone on about all these different stories for hours and hours. So we'll end it there. Hopefully that's an interesting segment, and we can kind of keep up with what's going on in Hollywood, looking ahead, seeing what's kind of in the world of Hollywood right now. As we review movies, as we talk about movies, also talking about what's going on currently. So pretty interesting. Now I'm going to move on to my Minions and Monsters review. I got to see this yesterday in IMAX. It was a fun experience, really, really enjoyable. I'm going to start off like I did last week with a spoiler-free section, and then later on get into my in-depth analysis about this movie. Minions Monsters, I had a lot less that I knew about going into this movie. It wasn't something I had been particularly anticipating, but it was a very fun movie. I went in, I enjoyed it. As a film nerd, I really enjoyed it. There's a lot of references to classic Hollywood, classic cinema that might get lost on most kids and probably a lot of the adults as well, especially since a lot of the references deal with the silent era of filmmaking, or even going up into like the 40s and 50s a little bit, but really not a ton that is maybe the most recognizable for the average viewer. But it was funny. Obviously, Minions, their cuteness appeal, their shenanigans and mischief that they create, that's what people go to see, and we definitely saw a lot of that, especially in the first act, and has a lot of humor kids are going to love, some humor for adults, and like I said, a lot of references for the film nerds in the audience. So definitely will be interesting to see how people respond to this. The box office is looking a little lower than people would have hoped. It's projected a 5-day start of 63.5 million in North America. They were hoping for 80 million. Now, that being said, it only cost 85 million before print and advertising. So yes, they're going to need to make up some money, but it's a kids movie. It's one of the most popular franchises of this century. It's definitely going to get up there eventually, and especially when the worldwide audience comes in, they make a lot of money in these movies from overseas audiences. It is usually about 60% of the revenue from these Despicable Me movies comes from overseas ticket sales. So still a lot. It's still number one movie in America this weekend, even with that less performance than they were hoping for. And it is the third opening for this franchise on a Wednesday. They opened it on a Wednesday rather than a Friday for July 4th weekend. And that's where they're hoping to get people during the holiday to come out and see this movie. The film is directed by Pierre Coffin. He's the voice of the Minions in Despicable Me. He also co-directed the first 4 of the movies of the franchise. He's been gone for the last 2, and then he's returned for this movie. Cast includes Trey Parker, Allison Janney, Christopher Waltz, Jesse Eisenberg, Jeff Bridges, Zoe Deutsch, Bobby Mohian, and Phil Lamar. So a lot of familiar faces, and obviously in animation, I guess more familiar voices would be the correct way to say that. And surprisingly, I guess this is now the 7th film in the franchise, it scored a 91% fresh for a critic score, 76% audience score. And that's a really interesting number. It's actually, I believe, the highest Rotten Tomatoes score of the entire franchise. a lot of that is when it comes to critics. Well, one, Rotten Tomatoes has a very certain way of calculating these percentages, right? And so if a majority of people liked a movie at 60%, rather than like a highly divisive movie where people either loved it or hated it, generally those movies where they're like good and everyone thinks they're good, maybe not great, they do get a higher percentage rating because more people are rating them fresh in the binary of like fresh versus rotten. At least that's how I understand that it works currently. And so part of it is that, and part of it is it's a movie about Hollywood, about classic cinema. Critics are going to love that. They always love when a movie is about Hollywood, when a movie is about filmmaking, and filmmakers. That's a big pastime. Just a lot of different films that have portrayed the making of film, documentaries on films. I mean, the amount of times you buy a Blu-ray and the special features have some sort of documentary built into it. It's like someone's always there filming the filmmaking process or making a movie like Babylon or La La Land that really celebrates cinema history. So that not too surprising that they got such a fresh score on Rotten Tomatoes, but definitely in an era of a lot of tired out franchises, a very good score for this movie. In my opinion, the movie is nothing crazy. It's a very fun movie. I definitely think a lot of kids will like it. The plot is pretty simple and honestly secondary to the Minions shenanigans. People go to a Minions movie for the Minions, similar to how people are going to the Mandalorian and Grogu movie for Grogu, or the shows for Grogu because he's cute, right? And often the minions in the original Despicable Me, Grogu, and the original Mandalorian show, they don't actually offer that much to plot movement and direction. And so in these minion movies, the first one was in 2015. I remember being a little disappointed by that movie because there really isn't much direction you can go with the Minions movie. They are the silly fart joke making, minions of a supervillain, and it not having Gru to drive the story forward and the emotional heart of the story definitely made that movie suffer. Now this movie has going for it a very the Hollywood cinema history, a lot of references both audibly and visually, and the backdrop, the actual plot is fun, but it kind of acts as a backdrop and a device for the minions to have more shenanigans, more antics that you get to watch. And that's what people enjoy. They really kind of work better as back in the day, Disney used to make a lot of short films for all their characters, right? Like Cars came out, was super popular with kids, and they made a bunch, like dozens of short films that focused around Tow Mater or Lightning McQueen and what they were doing. And those were always super fun. Kids are like, well, I like Lightning. I like Tow Mater. Let me watch this. And the Minions really work well in that kind of short film space where it's like, I just want to watch the Minions have fun and be goofy in their own way. And this is kind of like an extended version of that. So there is a plot in the background. The main plot premise focuses around a minion named James, and he's artistic, right? All the minions are going around, their tribe is trying to find the biggest, baddest boss that they can serve. And James is the creative one in the group, and he's always drawing and telling stories, kind of like a director or a filmmaker would, right? And he keeps accidentally killing off all their bosses, and then they have to move on to the next boss. And in the meantime, James meets Ed. He's a deaf minion, and there's another minion named Henry, I believe, and he just finds James hilarious. And so those are the three, like the posse, three main friends. And when they get to Hollywood in what's around the like mid-20s, height of the silent film era, and roaring 20s, businesses booming, extravagance, early Hollywood, they come into that, and they kind of mistakenly identify the film directors as like a big boss, but James and Henry and Ed love this because they've found a way to be creatively expressive with their work. And so then they become these great filmmakers. And the film is all surrounded. It starts off with like a tour, kind of like you would see at the Warner Brothers backlot tour, a lot of artifacts from things like E.T., different movies. And then they're like, well, none of this would have been possible without. And then it pans to a statue of James and Henry. And that's how the movie starts off, a tour guide telling the story of how James and Henry came to Hollywood prominence and make all the movies that they did, right? And so it's a kind of a silly premise, but it allows them, you see their wanderings as a tribe and all the shenanigans as they keep killing off all their masters. And then they move into Hollywood and then they get to start their shenanigans all over. And that's kind of what the silent film era was about, right? There was all these, you didn't have sound, and Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton, all these characters just really acting and in maybe a slightly slapstick way that the Minions do very well. And so that's kind of the original premise of the movie. Obviously there's a lot more to the plot, but I won't spoil that in this section. So yeah, it's a pretty good movie. I did not find the plot like particularly astounding, but I really enjoyed myself watching it, and I think a lot of kids are going to like it. It's super fun. There's actually whole sequences. I might venture to say that more of this movie is Minionese than even English, with no subtitles. And the way they found to get around that is they used a lot of words like they have in the past that are English with a little mispronunciation, and then actually a lot of Spanish, which for at least American audiences, there's a familiarity with that. I mean, at one point, a minion says "Que pasa?" or a minion says "Por qué?" And so a lot of those words coming into the minion language. I don't know who was behind making this language, but it's super fun, right? And super enjoyable, and just amazing that you can sit there and you're like, yep, kind of like the silent film era. You would see something on screen. You didn't need words to really understand what was going on. And here, you don't need a ton of words. And the words that you do need, you kind of understand in their own little Minionese language. Very fun. So kudos to them for that. So it's a fun movie. I definitely recommend it. I think a lot of people are going to enjoy this, especially kids. And if you're someone who loves classic cinema, you'll probably enjoy a lot of the references as well. That's going to end it for the spoiler-free section. I'm now going to move into the spoiler section of this movie. So, yeah, in-depth analysis. A couple weeks ago, Collider announced that there was going to be a cameo from George Lucas. And I thought, this is a voice acting thing. He's going to be like a minion or a character in the movie. No, it's actually George Lucas. So in the opening sequence, when they're walking into the like Warner Brothers backlot tour, George Lucas, the actual person, is like stuck behind a display case, and he's like, "Oh, can I get out?" You know, they're like, "No, you're fine. Like, just stay there." And that was pretty funny, especially people who grew up with Star Wars and the influence of that. George Lucas is a very familiar face, and it was just a fun little cameo there. Definitely, like I said, lots of references to silent era filmmaking or other famous films of the area. Some adult oriented jokes that even people who don't understand films would get. There's a character, one of the minions is named Dick. He's the one that doesn't really get along with anyone and is kind of annoying. So that is self-explanatory there. And a lot of kids jokes, lots of toot jokes, fart jokes, all that, right? Very classic Minions. Amongst some of the Easter eggs that I found were there's a segment with Charlie Chaplin and the factory from Modern Times. The Minions are obviously roped into that story right there. There's one point where a director is saying goodbye after a bunch of the Minions get laid off because at this point in the movie, the silent era has ended, sound has come into it, and the Minions don't speak English, so they don't work in an era where sound is an integral part of filmmaking. And so the director says goodbye to several minions, including like Steven, Quentin, Federico, obviously Spielberg, Tarantino, and Fellini. So a lot of even some more deep cuts there of filmmakers they're focusing on. One of the minions, his name is Humphrey, and he's in a noir film, very classic. And they have an African American guy playing the piano for the silent films during the silent film era. And at the end of it, they have their screening. They love the new movie that Max, the director, made because it has all these minions by accident in it. And the studio heads are like, they look over and they're like, Sam, can you play it again? And then sure enough, he plays the piece from Casablanca. And so there's that reference, right? A lot of different references here. Very fun. If you like these old cinema films, if you know them, it's enjoyable to see for sure. Like I said, the monster main plot did feel more like a subplot to me, to the minion antics. It wasn't my favorite. There's also Dort, this alien, and he has a girlfriend named Debbie. She's a women's rights activist, obviously part of this time. And really, like I said, these main plots and subplots feel more like the background. The ending scene, they need both because Dort and the aliens are the ones that eventually help destroy Irene, the giant eye monster. These plots work more as a backdrop to the minions' antics. Very fun to watch them just be minions. And maybe in 2026, I'm just more of a premise over payoff guy. For some reason, this movie, I also enjoyed the first half significantly more than the payoff of the actual film. I felt this way for Minions and Monsters. I felt this way for Masters of the Universe and Supergirl as well. And I felt this way for Mandalorian and Grogu. So kind of just a thing this year. I'm noticing a lot of great first acts that then kind of slow down later on. And part of that is, like I said, Minions work really well in the kind of premise short film space, and that is really funny at the beginning of this movie. And then toward the end, when they have to be a little more serious about the plot and the monsters coming and causing havoc, they're trying to eat the minions and trying to eat the world. Agumi is a little like Cthulhu character, and there's Phillips and Howard are these massive creatures frozen in the ice that they unfreeze, and Irene's the giant glob monster eating the world. There's a moment in there, also film reference, I think, where two of the minions are driving through Irene, and it kind of looks like a tornado scene from like Wizard of Oz or something like that. So lots of references, but the main plot, not necessarily anything new, but enjoyable and fun nonetheless. With that being said, part of the problem is that there is no Gru. And Gru really is the heart, especially of that first movie. I rewatched it recently, and that first Despicable Me is so good. It's really funny, and there's that emotional heart of seeing a villain with a bunch of cute minions playing for laughs, his heart melting, and him starting to love his girls. And that is really just a really great story. It's really fun. Steve Carell does such good work in that. And obviously in these Minions movies without Gru, there's less of that. There's less of that heart behind the movie, especially at least that the first one did have. So definitely doesn't have that aspect to this movie, but it's a fun movie. The post-credit scene does have a lot of elements that are fun. The minions earlier on in the movie come across a spell book. That's how they summon the Cthulhu-like character, and they use this spell book in funny ways. It's not really an end credit scene. It's just more like interstitials between parts of the credits, and they do play an aspect where they curse young Gru's dog, and it becomes Kyle, the crazy biting dog that we see in the first Despicable Me movie. So that was a fun little piece of lore. Definitely a lot of elements in this movie too that are very 2026 and this era of Hollywood. A lot of people in Hollywood trying to push back against the lack of theater attendance, the lack of creativity, kind of saying, hey, come back to theaters, watch movies where they should be. There's definitely elements of that in this. I definitely thought in the theater, I'm like, this is the kind of movie that if you're aware of what's happening in Hollywood in 2026, you're gonna get some things that aren't necessarily something that like a kid would pick up, or even maybe just the less informed adult who's just going and showing their kids this movie. And it's the kind of movie when I eventually have kids and show them this, they probably won't get that aspect either. Just a really interesting thing. Drew Taylor from the Wrap, he quote, a love letter to classic Hollywood, end quote, and quote, builds to an open-hearted tribute to the power of the communal movie-going experience. Definitely there was that string in this. I felt that as well watching it. And just a really interesting product of this time, using this art, this franchise to maybe put in a little message of, hey, let's go back to the communal experience of watching movies. So at the very end, it is revealed that tour at the beginning of the movie is a film in and of itself. It's a film within a film. They yell cut, and then you see that it's part of this whole even greater story of the Minions and the monsters. The music is by John Powell as well. Really like his work in How to Train Your Dragon. I mean, it's iconic. Nothing really stuck out here score-wise, but it seemed to do well for the film. So those are probably the end of my in-depth analysis. Enjoyed the movie. Main plot probably wasn't as strong as I would have liked, but it does a good job because at the end of the day, you're there to see the Minions be goofy and have fun. Now I'd like to pivot to a segment on animated movie franchises because just for a little bit here at the end, I want to talk about what does this mean, right? Despicable Me is now on their 7th movie. Toy Story just released their 5th movie. How is this? In an age when I think more and more people want more original movies, what does it mean that we're having all of these franchises, all these remakes? I will say I really enjoy these. It's significantly more than like the live action remakes. A lot of the live action remakes seem to be not very creative. They're just trying to make a new way. There's all those adults who won't go see an animated movie, right? And so it's a new way to share in that experience with their kids in a live action way. A lot of them made a little bit of sense, right? Like Cinderella has been around a long time. There's tons of adaptations of Cinderella. Probably will keep being a ton of adaptations for that. And then some of them like Moana, that movie is pretty recent and they're already coming out with a live action remake. And these animated franchises take a lot longer to cook, right? There's a lot of time between movies. Despicable Me started in 2010, so we're 16 years into the Despicable Me franchise. Toy Story is even way longer than that. Started in 95, and we're now in 2026, so 31 years of Toy Story, 5 movies in all. It just takes a lot of time to make these animated movies. And even though the stories tend to be pretty close together in time frame, and I think what we're seeing is Toy Story 5 debuted with a pretty good Rotten Tomatoes score. Minions and Monsters debuted with a pretty good Rotten Tomatoes score. And so as long as these people who are working on these films focus on making a good movie, I think they're going to be around for a while. I think there's these new creation of characters, and I'm all for creating new characters. But some characters enter the zeitgeist and then never leave. There's characters like Batman and Spider-Man. This is especially true with the superhero genre, who they came in to the world and they've not left. They're still relevant today. People still resonate with them. It's true with Star Wars as well. And we have this now generational thing going on, right? Star Wars, when people watch that with their watch that as a kid or a teenager, they then had kids and then they went to the prequels, and maybe even at that point, some of those people are now showing their kids the sequels. And whether or not they're good or not, there's a resonance, there's an importance of these franchises in culture. And Despicable Me, I think, is part of that group now. They've created, the Minions are just iconic. People know them all around the world. Gru such an iconic character, and these characters have kind of entered into our world, and I think they're around to stay. And they're the kind of thing that people who saw the Despicable Me as a kid in 2010 are now going to be having kids and showing their kids Despicable Me and the subsequent films, and going to see the newest Minions or Despicable Me movie in theater with their kids. And they same thing with Toy Story, right? I mean, Toy Story's been around a long time. People who saw it as a kid in the 90s now have kids who are maybe seeing it now for the first time. It's really interesting. And I think that's cool. As long as there's effort, creative work, right? Don't just AI generate something. Don't just write it in, phone it in. That's where a lot of these franchises run into issues. But something like Toy Story, there's so much heart, there's so much work. The creators really care about that franchise. I think with Despicable Me, we've had a couple that are lower. Minions and, Despicable Me 3 had lower, like 50s Rotten Tomatoes scores. But in general, they brought back audiences. Rise of Gru had the whole Gentle Minions phenomenon where people were dressing up in suits to go watch the movie because it was just fun. It was part of the culture. There's tons of, shorts, TikToks where people are doing the, Minions, we're going to the moon, and then everyone's cheering, right? It's just really entered our cultural space, and there's a select few, right? Not everything does that. I don't think Rio was a fun animated movie when that came out. It has not entered our cultural space in the same way that Despicable Me and Toy Story have. Not the same way that Batman has, right? And there's going to be hits and misses, but these characters, for better or worse, are kind of part of our culture now. Now, for something, Toy Story 5 has an advantage here in that the whole premise of the story is really about growing up and then your kids loving toys and what does it mean to play? What does it mean to play in this day and age with iPads and drones and things like that? So it has an advantage there in that the premise of Toy Story allows it to be pretty long lasting. I'm not sure how long Despicable Me will keep going, but people love the Minions. People love these characters. I'm sure they're going to keep working on them here and there. And yeah, hopefully we won't get a live action remake, but we probably will at some point. As long as there's creativity, I don't mind some of these, especially animated franchises, continuing on. And then you can take your kids to them and show them that and then just enjoy them together. As long as there's thought, as long as there's effort, I don't mind. I do mind when it seems cheap, when it seems quick, when it seems just for making a buck, right? Like a lot of the live action remakes feel. So it is a way that these movies work nowadays, and I think we'll see more in the future. Minions and Monsters was good. You should go and see it, especially if you're a fan of movies like I am. If you're listening to this podcast, you probably enjoy movies like I do. You'll enjoy some of the references in it and some of those shenanigans of the Minions. So that's it for today's podcast. Thank you for listening. Next week, I'll probably be talking about a live-action remake in Moana, and we'll see what else the news brings up in the next week for films. So thank you for listening. Have a great day, and I'll see you next week.